In a recent video, I went through all of the Synergy Core native effects, so the ones that are in the bundle, but I actually did miss two, so we're going to talk about that in a second. But for the sake of completion and for my OCD, we're actually going to go through now all of the non-native plugins, so the ones that you can either load up directly from inside of the mixer here, or you can run them through AFX to DAW if you have it. We're going to run them through AFX to DAW. I know it's a very glitchy system, but it's going to be a little bit easier than trying to keep bringing up this interface and, have the two screens running or whatever. So that's the plan for this video. Of course, I will add in the chapters so that you can skip around to what you want. But for a little bit of housekeeping, I actually recorded two videos for these two EQs, and then I forgot to add them into the actual video because there was just so much going on. As you can tell, it's over 5 hours. So we're going to clean that up first. We're going to do our two native plugins. Going to run them through AFX to DAW, but they are native if you have the bundle. And then we're going to go and get into the non-native. So sit back, relax, and I'm sure this is going to be another long video, but nowhere near as long as this one was. We'll start with the two that we missed that are available natively in the subscription, starting with the UK69 based on the Helios console EQ. So you can see here from UAD, their description: fat, authentic, analog sound, attitude and punch, bass delights. So you can see that this looks a little bit different to a lot of EQs, mainly because of this bass band, but we'll go through all of that together. So famous for its unique sound of the time, I think based on the transistors. And so a lot of really famous albums were recorded on the Helios console, which is extremely rare. I think they only made 50. There might only be 20 or so that are still operational today, but you can see a lot of these acts like Bob Marley, Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, AC/DC, Black Sabbath, David Bowie, Pink Floyd, all took advantage of the Helios console. And here is an example of what one actually looks like if you are curious. But just like all consoles, they're pretty easy to figure out, and they're all kind of designed to be quick. So once you get used to it, you'll have no problem working with it in the future. So let's go ahead and bring up our AFX to DAW, and we can see what this looks like here. So we have our bass band, our mid band, and our high band. PKTR. This, I think, means peak and through, but really you can think of this as like boost and cut. So when we turn the mid-range band, right now we'd be boosting, there we'd be cutting. So let's go ahead and turn this on. And I believe even in its default settings, there's like a little bit of a boost that's happening somewhere in the bass range. Not sure if that's modeled on this plugin or not. It doesn't really matter. But with our bass range, we can either do kind of just a bass cut. This says 50 hertz. I'm not sure where it actually is happening, if it's a shelf or a bell, but you'll be able to hear it. Or we can do a gain. And you can hear, even without me turning that, we're hearing a gain. And one thing with AFX to DAW is you'll hear these weird like pops and clicks randomly. So if you're hearing that come through, I apologize. I'm definitely hearing it in my headphones. And also one unique thing about AFX to DAW is like you can't go over 0, but you can get distortion. So let me demonstrate that for you. So this is going to be loud, just FYI, but I have my peak limiter on here, and let me just turn that all the way up to 0. So just a behavior to be aware of when you are working with this. Okay, so let's go ahead and work with the other bands too. So let's set something a little bit more smooth here for the bass. And then we'll work with the mid band. So in our case, kind of all of these frequencies are pretty flattering. There's nothing that I'd want to cut, but just so we can hear what the cut sounds like, I'll demonstrate that. Not even really hearing much of a difference. And in fact, it seems like we might be getting a little bit of a glitch behavior happening because I'm not hearing the effect like I should. Okay. It's a little bit better. And then we also have our high band here, which sounds nice. So that sounds really nice here. Let's also go ahead and clear it out, and I'm going to add it on again to, let's do our bass sound here. Again, not hearing anything that I want to cut. And yeah, let's just do that at 10K there. And get as close as we can to shooting over. And finally, let's also try this out on a synthesizer. It's going to be really aggressive with it. And that is a look at the UK69. Next up, we have the VEQ HA32C. So this is based on the Harrison console. I believe it's probably based on like the original, which is famous for recording artists such as like Michael Jackson. So kind of that sort of a pop sound. And I think what makes it kind of most famous or most well known is the fact that a lot of the bands kind of overlap in extreme ways. And that's not something that you see on a lot of console EQs. And that's something that we mentioned and talked about in our previous video with the SSL, where you could do the divided by 3 or times 3 to some of those frequency ranges in order to get them to kind of work together. If you're trying to do something cool like that, like a little boost cut sort of thing. So let's go ahead here and bring this on. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this on, and we'll use probably our other signals so we can hear something different. So here's our signal. And let's go ahead and bring on that EQ. So it is the HA32C. So we can start this out by working with the filters. If we turn them on, So from a functional standpoint, this is actually a nice EQ because it's going to be very fast and easy to work with, faster than actually working with like a digital EQ in a lot of ways. You have your filters right here, then you have your low, low mid, and high, and then you can switch between the shelf and the bell on the low and the high. So this is actually going to be a really, really fast EQ to work with, and you don't need to bring in a lot of other stuff. So like I might just have the high pass go until I hear it taking something away. And I probably don't need to use the low pass in this example. Now we have our low band, and you can see this goes all the way down to like below 40 hertz and goes all the way up to over 600 hertz. And then this one here is going from like 100 hertz all the way up to like 3.1K. This one 300 to like 7K, and then this one like 800 up to probably like 20K. So you could see how these are going to overlap and work with each other. We can listen to the bell. Cut a little bit there, and we'll be able to turn up our gain at the end. Now we go low mid. So we're really shaping this. Yeah, maybe we'll take out a little bit of that just so we can do a little sheen on top, probably around the same area. So in our case, pretty subtle. Let's use it to the extreme on this mix so we can really hear it. And again, this is just like a habit that I get into using AFX to DAW just to clear everything out. So let's go ahead and find that again. All the way up to around 100, maybe around 200, 400. See if we can find that one little resonance that seems to be poking out a little bit with our low mid band. It's actually right around here. I want to be aggressive for the sake of example. I don't like that a whole lot either. And then let's really find something in the highs we like. I think I like it up around there. I feel like we could even go more aggressive here. So this is an EQ I like, and it's one that you'd have to get used to because of all of that overlap. Like, it's even a little bit confusing to my brain looking at it, but it sounds good. It sounds pretty smooth, and you can see I push these things pretty aggressively, and it's still quite musical. So there you go. That's the VEQ HA32C. Now we'll move on to the non-native plugins, aka the ones you need AFX to DAW to work with, or just working from straight in the console. And just as a little bit of a intro to these ones, these are not really something you would ever pull to in your DAW to work with. There's nothing special about them. They're more like utilities for if you are a recording engineer and you're tracking in real time. I could definitely see people coming in and just very quickly grabbing something like the clear cue, because you're able to then like fast and on the fly make whatever sort of like changes that you need to or want to make, something like that. Or if you had a vocalist and you're just like, oh crap, I need some really quick de-essing. This isn't a bad de-esser, but there's just better stuff internally that you could use as a plugin and you would probably save time. But this one maybe isn't the worst. And like the feed forward compressor, maybe if you really love something about those detector circuits, you might bring it in. But me personally, I can never see myself doing it in the DAW. I'd rather just work with the internal stuff in Bitwig, for example. But let's go ahead and go through these here. Let's start with the master de-esser. And we have this vocal here. And you can hear it needs a little bit of de-essing. So let's go ahead and throw on that master de-esser. We can see our gain reduction meter here. And this one does have a few presets. Let's bring our female preset on. I'm gonna bring this down. And then I think we're gonna have to try to find where the S's are. Does sound like it's in there somewhere. Maybe I'll use the band pass. And yeah, I'm already annoyed of trying to work with this thing because my instinct is just instantly to bring on something like Pro Q to try to find that frequency really, really fast and then be able to take it out. So let me go back to typical S. Let's just use this. So yeah, I'm actually annoyed of trying to work with it. And you can see the various controls that we have and what we can do. And we can monitor different parts of the signal here, which is a nice feature. But I could just never see myself using it because this is already driving me insane. Like, I'm going to be way more likely to just go in here and go Fab Filter. Where is the Pro DS? And do something like this. You know, and that's just my workflow because it's just going to work so much faster. So, you know, I know that we're supposed to be showing off the AFX to DAW thing. It's just I would probably never use it because it's just not streamlined and efficient. Again, I'm showing it to you in this context. If we were tracking in real time and we really had to do some de-essing, I could probably figure it out. But yeah, that gives you an idea of the master de-esser. Next, we'll look at the clear queue, which again is not something you're probably ever going to work with in the DAW. You could just bring in your own DAW's stock EQ and it's probably going to be faster for you to work with, but I'll just let you guys see it and hear it for the sake of example. And also notice that there is no like output control, which is a problem. You know, you really need that for your gain staging if you are going to go into other things. So that already is kind of a problem. Can pan pass it, whatever. So we have a shelf here, which we can convert into a filter, high pass filter, but no additional control on that. Then we have just a standard bell that also has a cue that we can adjust. So yeah, let's imagine that I wanted to boost the sub up just a little bit. Need to do more. It's a little hard to do smaller moves unless you use your mouse wheel. And then let's just roll off, or let's do like a shelf at the top here. Something weird that we would probably never really do in real life. So that's a look at the clear queue. Again, if you used it every day, you could probably go pretty fast with it, but it's not going to even replace like whatever the EQ is that's already in your DAW, where you can drag and you can do stuff, you know, with your key commands. It's just never going to replace something like that. So by the time you get into the DAW, there'd be no reason to probably ever use that clear queue. The PowerFFC is a little bit more interesting, like feed forward digital style compression. And this one's interesting because of the different like RMS modes that you have. Again, I'm just going to keep repeating this. By the time you get into the DAW, your stock compressor or dynamics tools are probably going to be a little bit better for you. But let's go ahead and let's just bring this on to our drum loop here and play back. Okay, so this is really where the money is. It's in the detection. So you can hear a lot of distortion being brought in with that peak mode. But if we adjust the attack and release, we might be able to save that. I'm going to bring the knee up just a little bit. Notice, however, that we don't have a sidechain filter for this. We could do like an external sidechain deal if we wanted to do that, but that's just going to take a lot of time to set up. So be no reason to, right? If we can just do that in our DAW. Now, what would be more fun is when we try these other settings here. So let's go all the way to the other extreme and then adjust our attack and release. So you can hear we're not getting any of that distortion anymore. But what we can obviously hear in this case is it's really reacting and grabbing onto the bass frequencies, and that may not really be what we want to do with it. So again, as an example here, your just built-in dynamics tool is going to be a little bit more flexible because right here we have our sidechain effects where we could just bring on something like an EQ2 and just turn this into like a high pass filter. Maybe we'll just set this up in advance to around like 120, for example, maybe a little higher than that. In this case, we're just going to do traditional top-down compression. We have an RMS mode as well we could use. So yeah, that just gives you an idea of how it would be a much quicker and easier process to just use your internal dynamics tool versus going with that FFC compressor. Next up, let's go over the gate. This might be very practical for you if you are trying to remove like some ground hum, or if you have a vocalist who's super breathy, or there's a lot of bleed coming through from like headphones. That might be very, very important for you in this context. But when you're actually working here, it's unlikely that you're going to find much of a use for the gate when you already do have something that exists like in your DAW, or you might have a third-party plugin. Now, this isn't the best example because with this vocal, if you wanted to remove the breaths, you would just do it with gain. You wouldn't go in and use a gate. Like, it just isn't going to be precise enough. But in our example, we can kind of set that up if we really want to. So let's go ahead onto our group here and turn on AFX to DAW. And we have our gate that's already been brought on here. And I'll just go through the different settings. So like threshold is determining when is the gate going to react and then shut things off. You know, how fast is it going to react? How slow is it going to release? You can hold it for a second. This stuff you can do. Range is how much you want the gate to actually work. In this case, we can go up to 20. But let's start maybe with more of like a, I wouldn't say a special effect, but we're going to go overboard and then sort of try to bring it back in. So that didn't really do what I wanted to do perfectly. We could also try to kind of use this as a special effect. It's very tricky though with this one. Trying to find just the right spot. But yeah, I can't really get it to do what I want it to do in this case. So let's also imagine, for example, that maybe we were just using like a gate from our internal software. And let's go back to that vocal.
कैसे संभालूं मैं कैसे संभालूं मैं कैसे संभालूं मैं कैसे संभालूं.
So that's me trying to take out the breaths as best as I can, but it still doesn't like have a look ahead, so it can't react as quickly as I'd want it to. So if I was going to use a gate in this instance, I would use something like the fab filter.
कैसे संभालूं मैं कैसे संभालूं मैं कैसे संभालूं मैं कैसे
Just kind of make sure that look ahead is working.
संभालूं मैं कैसे संभालूं मैं कैसे
I do something like that.
संभालूं मैं कैसे संभालूं.
And that pretty much has taken out the breaths, but I'd still probably want to do it just with the audio editing. But I hope this gives you a good idea and kind of explains really why these utility tools that are available to you in AFX to DAW probably don't make sense to actually use in your DAW, unlike the other processors that we're going to get into. Finally, we have the Power Expander, which again, by the time you're working in the DAW, you're probably not going to use this, but it does exist. It is an option. So let's go ahead and just bring it in here on this sound first so we can see how it's working. Get rid of the gate, instead bring on the expander. All right, so you can see it looks very similar to a gate. Basically, it's going to go below a threshold and then kind of cut off. So it's a way of trying to like increase dynamic range without actually touching the peaks of the signal. So it's reacting more to the RMS, the average, or the lower parts of the signal. So having a hard time getting it kind of where I want it. It's kind of a cool special effect. You also do have control over the ratio, which is something with a gate you typically don't have. So yeah, again, having a hard time actually working with it. Whereas if I was to bring in my dynamics, I could do something, I could do a lot of different things with it. So if I'm working with the lower part of the signal here, I can do either ratio going up or going and cutting down. Right, something like that. Something like that's kind of fun. Or alternatively, what we could do is flip this on its head a little bit and be creative. And we're going to go whoop and go this way. And we're going to see gain coming up. Trying to enhance that like transient a little bit. Let's see if we can really really get that threshold. It's interesting. So yeah, that's kind of me playing around with just the dynamic settings, doing like upwards, downwards, like, expansion, like just being able to do really creative stuff. Whereas with this thing, we can see how cumbersome that is to try to work with. And obviously there's people out there that I'm sure can work with these tools really efficiently. It's not me, and it's not me because I don't have to, right? Like I know how to work with these internal tools. There's a lot more visual feedback, just a lot easier to dial in. So that is going to do it for these kind of effects that, again, serve a good purpose for tracking, but in the DAW, probably you're just going to be better suited sticking to what you already have and what you already know. Now that we've gotten the utilities out of the way, we can move on to more of the robust options and then more of the emulation. So let's start with Auto-Tune Synergy. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this. Basically, you just have a stripped down version of Auto-Tune you can use quickly inside of AFX to DAW or in the console. So if you don't have any kind of auto-tune effect, it could probably work for you. Now, in our case here, what we do have is something in A minor. So if we're in here in C major, we're really not going to hear much of a difference at all.
Music is only one real.
In fact, I would not expect to really hear any kind of a difference unless this has not already been run through some kind of auto-tune. So in real life here, if I was given something from somebody really, really raw, like they just sent you the clip of them singing and they've done no pitch correction whatsoever, you might just do something like this and just run it through.
Music is only one real.
And then kind of adjust your settings to something that you like. That's essentially the way to work with it. And this version very much is not about getting super creative. You're going to be much better served using a different plugin or using the actual suite from Auto-Tune if you're trying to go for really creative and unique effects. This one, like, let's say that I throw this into something like G sharp minor. Here's where I'm going to expect to really hear an effect.
Music is only one real.
And then we can try to...
Music is only one real. Music is only one real. Music is only one real.
But it's hard to really get a specialty effect.
Music is only one real.
Unless we really go like there.
Music is only one real. Music is only one real.
Yeah.
Music is only one real.
And then you also have the classic option.
Music is only one real.
So sometimes what I'll do, if I do have like a mono signal coming in, and this never works well with stereo signals, just be aware of that. But if I have a mono sample and I have no idea what the key is, but I know the key of my track, sometimes I will try to bring something like this on and just see if it sounds okay by me trying to force it into a particular key or scale. And sometimes it does work really well, sometimes it doesn't. But in essence, that is the auto-tune effect here. So let's go ahead and just come onto this one as well.
You say you don't remember. To me, it's clear. Feels like you got amnesia. You're not quite here. Don't pretend you weren't there. You know that it takes two. It was real, so real. It was me and you. Hold me close, be my desire. Let's get lost in time. Make the most of me right now. You can cross the line. You say you don't remember. For me, it's clear. Feels like you got amnesia. You're not quite here.
All right, so that gives you an idea of working with it. We don't really need to go any further than that. Very easy to just kind of come in, choose your, and I mean, this is the way I would work with it. Come in, pick the thing that makes the most sense, make sure you lock it into your key, and just kind of let it do its thing, and then subtly adjust the different parameters to see if you can get a sound that you like. So very practical. Don't think I would really use this for a special effect, but you could try. I mean, if you really push it, I'm sure you could get it to do some cool things. The next one is Instinct Synergy. It's like a tube and transistor distortion effect that's also supposed to have like a lot of modulation capabilities. I personally have a very difficult time getting this thing to work. So I have glitches. It really bugs out in a lot of different scenarios for me. So if that happens again here, you know, we're just going to try to listen to some presets and then try to work with it from scratch, but I can't promise that we'll actually be able to do that. So we have this bass sound here. And in this instance, I am going to bring up the mono one because if I don't, I tend to have problems with how it sounds. So I'm going to try to bring in the mono one. We're going to try to go to special processing and bring this on. And you probably heard that horrible loud click. So let me go ahead and just bypass. Yep. I'm going to have to really aggressively edit the video here. Yeah, I don't know what the deal is with this one. It just doesn't work. Let me go mix 100%. So I'm almost terrified to do anything with it. Let's go to creative and just see if this is going to work. So we can see there's a lot of modulation happening here. Tends to happen with me is it's like I change these settings and I just don't really hear anything. So I don't know. At its core, you can do a drive between a transistor and a tube, and you can set the amount. Let's go 100% mix. And then in theory, there's supposed to be some modulation that's happening. I'm just telling you, I don't seem to be able to get any of this stuff to work. And in theory, I am supposed to be able to click that on and off. Okay, at least that's doing something. Sure why I can't click on that one. Oh, Nelly. Okay. It's a weird plugin that just does not really work the way I think it's supposed to. I don't think we're supposed to be hearing that. Let's try this one. Oh boy, we might have really broke it. Okay, we are going to end this one here because clearly there is something not right. Let's try these effects. Huh. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you about this one other than you probably just want to be recording audio at any time that you're using it because you might get some really wild and wonky effect to come out. I have listened to just the presets of like tape and transistor and tube, and like those aren't bad when it works. But like with a lot of these kind of effects that we've looked at, and even in the previous video, what's so critical is that stuff works and that you don't have to guess what's going to happen. Because here, where I'm just guessing, like, would I ever trust to put this into an actual session? Like, absolutely not. This thing is wild. And hopefully they figure it out. And this seems like one that if they released it natively, like maybe that you would be able to work with it in a more reasonable way. But yeah, for me, this is a 100% pass on an effect because it just doesn't really work, at least on my system, running it through AFX to DAW like this. So for the sake of full transparency, I decided I'll show you what's happening right now for me when I try to bring in the reel-to-reel tape machine. And currently it is not working at all. And this tends to be an issue for me when I use AFX to DAW is like sometimes this particular plugin loads, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it gives weird squeaky pop noises that make it feel like you're going to go deaf. And anyway, I'll just show you what's going on. So here's our sample. And let's go ahead and bring on AFX to DAW here. And we will try to bring up our reel-to-reel. And when we play, we get no sound at all. Now, we can hear the hiss, but if we try to do anything with these settings, we are never able to get the signal to come through. So I tried to restart a couple times. I tried closing everything down and opening it again. Sometimes I'm able to get this thing to work and sometimes I'm not. So that's currently where we're at. I'll try again at the very end of this video again tomorrow to see if I can get it to work. But again, this is one of the reasons why you just have to be very careful about using these plugins is they're just not very reliable and weird stuff happens. Whereas, of course, if I decide to come in here and bring on like the UAD tape recorder, for example, I know that it's going to work. And that is, of course, the reason why, you know, I feel like Antelope is attempting to compete with UAD, but they really just can't. Even if it just comes down to something as simple as reliability, it makes a huge difference. Obviously, it's critical to actually producing music. So when I woke up this morning, first thing I did was restart my computer, bring on reel-to-reel again, and now it is working. And this is Antelope's tape machine, and so it has kind of your standard controls. It has a hiss, it has a wow and flutter, which I don't really think we're even going to use or work with because for our purposes, it's more about hearing what the tape machine is doing. Also have our speed control, our NAB versus IEC, which we'll look at in a second, and then also a bias control. So with these controls here, along with your input gain, you can get a lot of variation and different sort of tonal shaping out of this tape machine emulation. First thing though, let's talk about NAB versus IEC, and this might be useful for some people. So I just grabbed this one comment because I think this is the most useful just to very briefly understand what's going on. So IEC uses more pre-emphasis, but the higher headroom of modern tape formulas makes it okay and results in less hiss. IEC also doesn't use bass pre-emphasis, which NAB does. That gives IEC a bit more low-end headroom. Most commercial 15 IPS master tape dubs available today use IEC, but nearly all the 7.5 IPS pre-recorded tapes from the 1960s on used NAB. So IPS stands for inches per second, the speed that the tape is being recorded to. So really though, when you're actually in here working with it, it's best to just experiment. And then the same thing is kind of true for the bias control. And I was going to go through and give you guys a whole lesson on bias, but I realized it's just easier to just in this example go in and listen to what happens when we have something that's full frequency range going through the tape. And I'm just going to drive into it kind of hard. So So we can hear that the 30 sounds closer to the original, which is what we're expecting in this case. So you have to remember that tape machines were initially kind of made to get as clean of an audio signal as possible. Like that was the development of them. So even though now we associate tape with a lot of like saturation and coloration, that wasn't really its intended purpose. The goal was always to get as clean of an output signal as possible. So we are driving a little bit too hard. Okay, now let's do it at 15. And this is going to be something that when you're working with this, if you are working with it, it really is just using your ear and kind of trying out all of these different settings here to find what works the best. Or if it's me using it, I'm probably just going to bring it on in its default, push it in. Does it sound good? Yes or no? If yes, leave it on. If no, go to a different tape emulation or don't use tape at all. So you can hear all that high end that's now coming in. But at 30, it might sound a little better. Yeah. And then we have our bias control as well. So with these settings, we're doing something pretty modern and it's giving us like a very kind of clean output signal. Likewise, we could kind of do the inverse if we really wanted some coloration. So we could go over, do that. Took the high end out completely. It's interesting. And just for the sake of it, we can put the hiss on. And you can hear what that sounds like. I don't believe it ever cuts off, so it's just a permanent hiss sound. And then we have the wow and the flutter, which I believe in my previous video, which was on the spectral plugins, I discussed what wow and flutter are in a little more detail. Basically, these are just pitch variations. So flutter, very, very quick pitch variations. Wow, a little bit slower, subtler over time. Excuse my little cough there. This is first thing in the morning. You can hear that. And let's see if we have like a synthesizer where that might be also appropriate. It's pretty subtle on this one. And here might be where using over would make sense if we're trying to tame the highs. And it's not a horrible effect having that on in this example. So that's kind of a cool effect. So yeah, it's a decent enough tape emulation, and in a pinch, it definitely will work. Of course, I think a lot of us, myself included, I tend to be a tape machine hoarder of plugins. I don't know why. I just am attracted to them. And so I pick most of them up. So I have a lot of options I can go to for tape, but I like this one as well. So definitely worth probably checking out and experimenting with if it will come in and work, which we saw before was a bit of an issue for us. Next up, we have the VCA 160, which is based on the very famous DBX 160, kind of a consumer level mono compressor that you can, purchase for relatively cheap. And we can see what it looks like here. And most famously used on drums and other mono sources like that, but you can definitely try it on anything and see if it will work for you. So let's go ahead and bring this in now on our AFX to DAW. And one of the things that you'll see with other emulations are the lights actually lighting up, whether it's above or below the threshold. In our case here, that is not working. But then we also do have our various compressor settings here and output gain, very easy to work with. And this is going to be showing us gain reduction. And after we try this on a few sources, we'll also just bring in the one from SoftTube as a comparison, just so we can kind of see how they work and how they're different. So we have our signal playing here. And I'm going to bring it in. And right now we can see we're not really getting any compression, just a little bit. We could obviously increase the ratio and we'll see a little bit more, but this is more related to the volume of the signal that's coming in. So I'm first going to bring in just a little more gain, and then I'm going to adjust the threshold knob as well. So you can really hear what it kind of does to the attack of the signal, and it's a pretty punchy compressor, as you'd normally expect with VCA type stuff. All right, let's try it on our nylon guitar, same settings. And let's try it on this piano. And again, I'm going to bring the volume of this one up a little bit. We just do a little bit. And let's listen to that transient. So not bad at all. And then let's throw it onto whatever sort of percussion and drums we have. And we better turn the volume up on this one as well. Trying to find that sweet spot. Maybe we just tickle it a little bit. And then for the sake of comparison, what I want to do is just bring on our SoftTube version of this, where we're going to get a little bit more feedback from the lights and everything. So you see that above and below, and you see our different controls that we have here with the ratio and all that good stuff. So let's start it out on the same signal. So again, we can choose how much compression we want. And this one's going to be I don't know, just kind of easier to work with and dial in. And we have some other controls too, like we have that built-in sidechain filter, which if you watch my other video, you know I really, really appreciate and like having. So that sounds pretty good. We can also slightly adjust the attack and the release time, which is something we can't do on the other one. So this one I was able to pick up for free just for having a Loop Cloud subscription. And I think I would be a lot more likely to pull to this one than the one from Antelope. Next on our list is the X903. This is modeled on another DBX compressor limiter that I have no experience with whatsoever. And what's really cool about this one is that there is like a negative ratio that you can set with the compressor, and that's not something you see every day, and so it can give you some kind of cool special effects. And it's also, at least in Antelope's version, extremely easy to work with. You can just pretty much drop it on any signal, see if you like the effect it's having. And I've played around with this one a little bit, and I do like this one. So let's start it out here on our bass sound and turn it on. And we have our level coming in and our gain reduction meter. So of course we can just change our threshold to start to bring in a little bit more. And then we can choose what we want for the ratio. So as we go down this way, we start getting into these negative values and we get kind of an interesting special effect. Let's go right to about there. And we'll bring some gain back. So I think it sounds really good, or we can go into more of our traditional ranges here. So I think this is good. It obviously has a very quick attack time. Try it on a vocal as well.
You say you don't remember. To me, it's clear. Feels like you got amnesia. You're not quite here. Don't pretend you weren't there. You know that it takes two.
Obviously, this needs a lot of EQ on it.
So real, it was me and you.
So yeah, this is definitely one that I like. One of my favorites of all of the Antelope compressors that I've tried, and definitely worth checking out yourself. So again, for the sake of transparency, I've tried to bring the Impressor on at this point, and it's just not working. So let's just actually have this audio playing here, and we'll go into AFX to DAW, and we'll go to our vintage compressors. We'll go to the Impressor, and we can see we are not getting any audio to come through the plugin unless we are bypassed. So obviously, again, I'm going to try to like restart another time and bring this up another day and see if it's going to work then. But for now, it is not working. So we do have the Impressor now working, at least audio is coming through it. Kind of. This one to me though still seems really buggy and really glitchy. So while the compressor it's modeled after, and I believe it is this EL8X version just based on these different toggle switches, is very popular, something that you'll find in almost every modern studio. And now finally we do have some different plugin emulations of it available. For a while, this one didn't really have a lot of plugin emulations, but this particular one from Antelope is it's as much as I would love to say it's great, it's just very buggy and glitchy from my experience working with it up till now. So let's bring it on to this vocal here, and we'll come down and we're going to grab it. Now, the first thing that you're going to do is choose your ratio. So when you get to 10:1, you're going to see that an opto mode gets engaged. So that's going to adjust kind of the attack and the release and just the characteristics. So this makes it a little more LA2A style. And then we also do have a really aggressive like nuke setting, which is kind of like doing the all-in on an 1176 or an 1178. So you can understand why a compressor like this is so popular in the modern studio, because it can do a lot of different things. So let me just go to maybe the opto mode, because we have a vocal and we also have this detector, which is really useful. So like if we know that the main frequency here is around like 1.5, I can move that detector up to that range. And for this one, it will either be 700 or 1.5. And it's then probably going to start to trigger some gain reduction for us.
You say you
and we are getting a little bit already.
To me, it's clear. Feels like you got amnesia. You're not quite here. Don't pretend you weren't there. You know.
And I'm going to bring the attack time down until it gets distortion-y.
So real.
And in our case here, it's not even bringing in any distortion. That's probably because we're on the opto mode.
Hold me close, be my desire.
I'm actually surprised we're not getting any distortion. Okay.
Make the most of me right now. You can cross the line.
We have some harmonics we can bring in.
You say you don't remember. For me, it's clear. Feels like you got
probably if we engage
amnesia.
UK mode, we'll get some
not quite here.
distortion. Let's see.
You say you don't remember. To me, it's clear. Feels like you got amnesia. You're not quite here.
So what I'm getting right now are very much unexpected results, if I'm being honest with you. So we are able to get a pretty nice sound in here. Let's turn stereo link off, because it is a mono signal. But this thing will also glitch out on you sometimes. So if you turn this on, sometimes you'll have more signal coming out of one speaker than the other.
You say you don't remember. To me, it's clear. Feels like you got amnesia. You're not quite here. Don't pretend you weren't there. You know that it takes two. It was real. So real.
It's kind of weird.
It was me and you. Hold me close, be my desire. Let's get lost in time. You say you don't remember. To me, it's clear. Feels like you got amnesia.
Okay, let's try one of the other settings. Let's just do it at like 5:1.
You say you don't remember. To me, it's clear. Feels like you got amnesia. You're not quite here. Don't pretend you weren't there. You know that it takes two. It was real. So real.
And this is kind of the sound you associate with this compressor.
You say
very
you
in your face.
Don't remember. To me, it's clear. Feels like you got amnesia.
All right, let's go ahead and try this on our drum bus as well. I really just want to get some very kind of aggressive, obvious sound on it. So our drums are here. And let's go to like as aggressive settings as we can do. don't think we need to use this other detector. And yeah, this is what I kind of associate this compressor with, this kind of sound. And I'm trying to get it to distort because you can get it to distort pretty easily. And somebody would have to tell me, I don't know, and I thought you could on the hardware, that there was a mode where you have both lights on. In our case here, it's just going through the 3, so I'm not entirely sure about that. But yeah, that's the Impressor on a drum loop. Let's also just put it onto a full mix. You'd also put it onto guitars and stuff like that, but just so we can really hear the quality of it. Let's use this one. Have stereo linked. Okay, so in theory, this is kind of more of our starting point when you bring it in. All right, and we're gonna put that up to about 80. And yeah, let's just do 4-to-1 in this example. And then we're gonna have to drive until we start to see some gain reduction. A sweet spot in here somewhere. It's kind of interesting to have that on up there. Even with our super aggressive settings, then we're not getting anything. Interesting. There we go. Okay, cool. And that is the Impressor. The other thing I'm going to look up really quickly on this model is what exactly UK mode is supposed to do. So I'll be right back with you and give you an update. Okay, so I just found this article right from Empirical Labs. So I may have said something a little bit wrong. I think I said nuke mode was like doing the all in, but I guess in general, you can just flip the British UK switch on or off, and it should give it more of that 1176 sound at any ratio. they just said, what did they say here? They said something about keeping the attack well under 4. And I guess that's going to do what we want it to do. So let's go ahead and now try to bring this back on and just make sure our attack is very, very quick. Okay, here we go. Now we're getting some real distortion. Sounds very different. I don't know. What I'll tell you is this one in the plugin form, hard to kind of wrap my head around. So while the hardware unit is amazing, not so sure about this as a plugin. If you work with it enough, I'm sure you can probably figure out how to get a really good repeatable sound out of it. But for me, I definitely feel like I'm just shooting in the dark with this. Up next, the NEU 473, and this is based on a compressor limiter that you really don't see modeled at all. So that kind of makes it special in that respect, and it is one of my favorite ones from Antelope Audio. So if you read this, you'll see that this was designed as the main limiter for vinyl disc cutting from the 1970s and on, and it's all about the mid-range with this one, as we're going to hear. And I think similar to like the Fairchild, that was its original design too. It was like the final compressor limiter before going to the cutting lathe. But yeah, this is not one I really knew anything about until getting into this series and doing this. So for that reason alone, it's pretty cool. So we're going to start with our mixed percussion here. And let's get ourselves into full screen. And we're going to bring it on. All right, and the first section we do have is an expander that we can take advantage of initially. So depending on the variation in dynamics in your signal and also the initial volume coming in, that is really going to determine how aggressive this thing is. So I think it will work right out of the gate when I turn this on, but you might need to go in and decrease your volume. So if we bring this back up to 0, let's see. Okay, we are getting a little bit actually. But I'm going to turn it down more, and that's going to make that effect a little more extreme. And then we have a recovery time. So at a certain point there, it's just too fast. It's not going to work, or too slow, sorry. It's not going to work anymore. So we're going to go right to there. So in theory, this is expanding our dynamic range a little bit before we go into the compressor. And then what's nice is we do have a gain control because we probably would need that because our signal has to be turned down a decent amount to get that expander working. So I am just going to turn up the signal by a decent amount here. All right, and then we have our ratio control here. And so let's just do something a little more subtle here. Let's do it at 2:1. And then we have 3 different attack times, a very slow, medium, and fast. And I like it the most when it's on its fastest time, but for this example, let's go medium. And then we also have a recovery that is going to go from fast to slow. And so keep in mind, again, what the purpose of this was. It was kind of like a final soothing or glue before the record would be cut. So let's go ahead and bypass it and turn it back on. And I really like this one. All right, now let's get a little bit more aggressive with our settings in here. Let's turn the expander off for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this into limiter mode. And then I'm going to drive the gain even harder. And then let's increase the attack time speed. And then let's make the recovery as fast as possible. And the reason I'm doing this is it will allow us to kind of hear what's going on with the De-Esser and the bass cut. So essentially, when I turn De-Esser on, let's listen just to kind of like those hi-hats. We'll hear those get mellowed out a little bit, putting more emphasis on more of the mid-range, like if you had a vocal. And I'm gonna drive it in even harder. You can really hear it now. And then we also have like a bass cut, which it's an interesting one. It really depends on the source material. In a lot of cases, you're really not going to hear it doing anything. In this case, you definitely will. But I've noticed that you really have to have aggressive settings for you to hear what's going on with this one. So again, I feel like what it's trying to do is like clean up the mud range a little bit. Like it's not really cutting your subs necessarily, and it's not really doing what you would think when you read something like bass cut. It really seems to just be cleaning up the lower mids by a little bit to try to again emphasize more of that standard mid range. So this is how this thing works. Let's also maybe just bring this on to like one of our full mix examples. And again, I'm probably gonna be pretty aggressive because that's where we can then like really hear it. And I don't know why it does that when you bring it in. That's a glitch, but that seems to happen every time. But let's turn the expander on again because I just kind of like the expander. And we'll notice in this case, we're not seeing anything. And that's because our signal's, I think, probably just coming in too hot and it's already like pretty compressed. So I'm gonna turn the signal way down. And with this one, we may not ever even be able to get the expander to react. All right, there we go. Finally a little bit. And now, you know we're turning that all the way. And maybe we'll just do something really subtle in this case. Like I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do the really slow time, and I'm gonna do auto on the recovery. And then let's bring this back so it's not as aggressive. Okay, but now at this point, we're not really actually even seeing it recover ever because it's just too slow. Okay, so we have to get this just right almost. Because I do want it to still do something, vary somewhat. Okay. And yeah, I think the recovery time coupled with that attack time, this isn't gonna work for us. So let's try to go middle and still leave it on auto. I'm still not really a fan of that because you almost hear it like jumping. So again, I'm gonna try, I just don't think there's ever really gonna be a situation where I would use that slow of an attack time. Maybe here will be a little smoother. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. And I'm sure if we were really going into a cutting lathe, this might have much more of a true function. But let's go back to the middle again, and let's do something just a lot more subtle. Still really hear it jumping, so I think I'm gonna have to go with the fast one. Yeah. It's interesting. And yeah, it's almost like coming out of this, I still need to go peak limiter. I don't know. I'm realizing that if I tried to actually use this on the mix bus, it may not work, even though that's kind of what its real function is for. Maybe it is because I'm using the expander. And yeah, I think that was it. Yep. So definitely be careful, I guess, using the expander, because in this example, for me to get the expander to work, I had to go really aggressive with the settings. So that gives you an idea of this NEU 473A. I think it's fun because it's different. It's not something that you work with every time. It's still very easy to set up. It sounds good, and has these cool little DS and bass cut features as well, which is not something that you see on compressors or limiters typically. Next on the list, we have the Diode 609, which is based on the Neve 33609, a very famous limiter and compressor duo. And there's not too many of these left in existence, I don't think. So they're pretty rare, pretty coveted, especially the originals. I'm sure there's a lot of clones and stuff like that that exist out here. And similarly, this is something that you can try on pretty much any signal material and see if it does the job for you. It's always nice to have both a limiter and a compressor bundled together because at least working digitally, that tends to be a combo that you'll do a lot. You might do some peak limiting followed by a little bit of compression. So let's go ahead and bring this one on. And we can see this Diode 609. We have our limiter section, then we have our compressor section. So I'm going to start by turning the limiter on, and then we'll bring the threshold down till we see a little limiting. There we go. We're getting a little bit, and we can choose if we want a fast attack time or a slow attack time. Typically, we're going to want the fast attack time because we want it to grab the transient if we're then going to try to let some of the back through with the compressor. But if you're just working with the limiter, you could potentially try to use that slow one. And we have a couple of auto settings for the release as well. Maybe more for like mastering applications. But something like this, we can hear the transient clicking through a little bit more. And I'm not sure if this gain will work if we don't turn the compressor on. And it will not. So I'm going to turn the compressor on, but I actually don't want to do any compression. I just want to bring a little bit of gain on. And what's interesting is we're actually getting more gain reduction now. So that would lead me to believe it's almost like the compressor is then going into the limiter or something like that. Not really sure. Interesting. Okay, so I wasn't expecting that, so that's a kind of a unique behavior to this. So we can also then use the compressor if we want to use that together. So I will go ahead and I'm just going to barely tickle the limiting. And now we're going to start to bring in the compressor. And we again have a fast or slow attack time. Let's go slow. Let's increase our ratio a little bit. Maybe around there. And then we do have a high pass filter if we do want it to ignore just the subs of the signal. Something like that, maybe. We can see we're doing a lot of compression. I'm going to turn the gain on, but I'm worried we're going to see even more. And so after doing that, what I'm thinking we'll do is we're going to turn this off. And yeah, go even gentler here. So when we turn it back on, the limiter is going to be doing some work. Keep clicking the wrong one by mistake. All right, let's turn this back on. Nice. And now we can bypass. We are just trying to emphasize that transient just a little bit. So there you go. Let's throw it onto an acoustic guitar. And this time we just will not use the limiter at all. There we go, it's a little faster. And these usually have that dual stage, so you kind of got to fine tune it. Again, there's no like final output gain, so it's a little bit harder to gain stage. Again, I think I want a faster attack here. There is a sidechain where you can kind of hear the signal, you know, without the low end, but it really turns the volume down, so I don't find it like that useful. Really hear it getting a little clicky there. And finally, let's use this on one of our mix buses. Or maybe we'll put on the percussion. We haven't done anything on the percussion for a while. And I really want to almost just start over. One thing that's kind of annoying about all of these ones with AFX to DAW is that when you close it out and you bring it back in, it just kind of loads up your previous settings. So sometimes that can be a little bit annoying. Okay, so now we're basically starting with it from scratch. Helps if you turn it on. Okay. Cool. And then finally, we will go and throw this onto one of our mixes. And here's where we can take advantage of those like auto two-stage release times. So let's turn the threshold all the way up. Fast one. So the one thing that really throws me off with this one is this gain knob and then that interaction with the limiter. I don't know, something about this just doesn't like compute with my brain, but we can see how this one works with our limiter and our compressor section. And yeah, that is a look at the Diode 609. Up next, we're going to look at the Brainiac, which is based on the Valley People Gain Brain 2. And I believe Softtube made an emulation of this one, and it's pretty rare when you search it and you're trying to buy these secondhand. You don't see a lot of them popping up. Very, very good on drums. That's their most common application because you can be really aggressive and really get some audible pumping sounds out of them. But let's go ahead into the DAW and work with it. So we're not going to work with it in sidechain mode just because I don't even really know how to set that up with Antelope, and I would never even probably attempt to do it. But it's a very basic compressor. So I think the reason they write duck here is in relation to if you are kind of going sidechain, but it is just the ratio control. We have our threshold, we have our ratio, we have some gain, which you really need to use on this one. And then we have our attack and release in 2 modes for the release, with the log mode being a little bit more curved. But this is a very audible compressor. So it's if you're trying to learn what compression does, this is a great one to work with. It's not going to be super subtle, unless you want it to be. So let's start by just cranking the ratio up, and let's increase, the threshold and ratio. So we're really seeing some stuff happen here. And then I'm just going to turn the gain up. And we're hearing a lot of distortion right now because the attack time is so fast, and probably because the release time is so fast. And you can really audibly hear that difference kind of with how fast it's snapping back. In this case, linear sounds pretty good. Okay, I got to bring this down. So this gives you just a great idea of what a compressor can potentially do to the dynamics of your sound. So like I said before, if you're ever trying to learn what compression is, what it does, or what it can do at the extreme, here is your example. So for that reason alone, I kind of like this one because so often when we were doing our other series, we're doing very tube-based compression. And in a lot of situations, if I'm being honest, it's really not audible. And I'm one of the people that will admit that. If I'm going through and doing a video like this and I'm not really hearing a difference, and I am working with headphones, so that does distort things a little bit. But I will tell you, with this one, you can definitely hear the compression. And there you go again. You can really hear the compression. You can hear when we let the transient through how much that's clicking and popping. So definitely a good one to combine with a peak limiter. Really hear almost that sucking sound of the audio. So yeah, that is the VP Brainiac 2. Definitely a fun one to work with, easy to set up, and a great one for learning the sound of compression. Next, we have Gatekeeper, and really I probably should have done this one after Brainiac. It's identical, but it's just impacting the signal in the opposite way. So it's more of a gate. Well, it is a gate, whereas the Brainiac is still your typical kind of compressor, top down. So if we look at it, we'll see that this looks basically identical to what we were just looking at. And this one's fun to play with too, like the other ones from Valley People. Once you get used to working with them, you kind of know what to expect. And just so that you don't go crazy with that percussion loop, let's go ahead and let's bring it on to the main drum loop, and I'll just set everything back to its default position. And let's take a listen. Okay, so again, we want to kind of set our ratio first, and if we go really aggressive, it will basically just react like a gate would react. You can see we're just letting that transient come through, so that's kind of cool. And then again, we have our linear and our log mode. Very obvious to hear what that's doing. But then we can also kind of like bring this back to something a little more, I don't know. I don't even want to say sonically pleasing. We just bring more of this signal back in. If we kind of fine tune these a little bit. So this one would definitely be fun to play with in different settings and stuff. Can do some really cool stuff. Put the 10. Pretty cool, right? So yeah, I mean, obviously if you have a purpose for something like this, it will work great. For me, working in the digital domain, I don't really need these three tools. Like there's just digital tools that do this stuff, but I have to say these are definitely fun to play with. In terms of practical use, it just depends on your situation and what you're trying to accomplish. Up next, we have the Drum All Night based on the Dyna-Mite. And you can see that I've actually brought up the manual from SoftTube, which is going to be very useful when we're working with this thing, because even though there's just a few controls, it is a little bit confusing to work with. And we can see what one of these looks like in real life. So it's all about kind of working with these settings here. And the rest of it is very straightforward and kind of easy to understand. So let's bring it in. And the way to think about this is we kind of have two modes. We obviously have like an external, like a sidechain sort of mode if we wanted to set that up. Again, I'm not going to do that with AFX to DAW. We have this internal and this like DS mode. And so you'll just have to listen to see what you prefer. This is more so referring to the attack time. So we have kind of a faster attack time, or like a super fast attack time, like a fast attack time, and then a slightly slower attack time. And then this one refers to our modes. So are we doing limiting or are we doing expansion? But ultimately, you just kind of have to use your ears and experiment. That's probably the most fun part of this. So let's go into expansion mode and let's go into this gate mode over here to start. And we'll leave this on internal. And we're playing and we are not hearing anything. And that is because we have to adjust this threshold to let some of the signal come through. Right now, it's like all getting gated out. You can also set the range over here. So if we're at 0, obviously we're going to be hearing stuff. But let's go extreme. Let's set it to 60. And then let's just bring our threshold down so we start to get a little bit of a peak coming through. We could do something like that. So this one's all about just dynamic shaping. And if you want to do extreme stuff, you definitely can. Let's turn it up a little bit. Okay, so now let's try going into the DS mode, just hear the difference. And in this case, it's almost emphasizing those frequencies. So again, you just have to use your ear. Let's go to our peak setting, which is still a fast attack time. And I guess for testing purposes, it will be best if we just leave this all the way down. Let's go back to internal mode. Again, this is letting a lot more through. And because we're out of gate mode, we're always hearing a little bit of something. And now let's go to average mode. And I just want to give you a little bit of a feel for this one so that you can really hear all the differences in what you can do. And now we're going to go into limiter mode. And let's just reset everything. Let's bring, uh-oh. Our knob glitched out. Ah! All right, let's try to bring it back in. That's a new one. I haven't seen that before. Okay, cool. So now let's go into our limiter mode. So now we're doing like top down, right? And we can actually hear something at this point. But because it's not like super, super fast, we're actually still hearing the transient get emphasized. We can try it in DS mode. And this time, we hear that those higher frequencies are being pulled out, where when we were on expander mode, those were kind of being emphasized. And let's see what happens if we go into gate mode. I'm not sure if anything will happen in gate mode when we're here limiting, but it might. Oh, yep, it definitely did. Interesting. Wow. Hoping if we brought that up, maybe we'll not get that distortion as aggressively. Really fascinating and interesting little tool to work with. Oh no, my range knob got messed up again. So I'm having fun playing with this thing, but I don't think I would ever actually use it. I'd probably recommend that you get the soft tube one, personally. Okay, so we're going to go back into our limiter mode, and we're just going to try not to touch the range knob, I guess. And let's go into average. Which in theory should be even letting a little bit more of the transient come through, which is what I'm hearing. And again, DS is going to now pull out some of those higher frequencies. All right. So yeah, like as a little bit of a transient shaper sort of deal, this thing is a lot of fun to work with. Just a shame that we're having such issues with our range knob. Oh, it happened again. I wanted to, maybe if I turn this. Nope. I want to bring that in one more time on the peak just to see, because I don't know this in advance, if that is going to limit like the amount of limiting we're doing, which actually would be probably useful because this thing is so aggressive. If you are just trying to do something a little bit more subtle. Yeah, anyway, it's totally bugged and glitched out, but that is a look at the VP Drum All Night. And finally, we're going to take a look at the guitar amps and cabinets, and it's probably worthwhile to look into the manual to read about some of these things. Specifically, what I was interested to know about were this stuff like the rear mic, the 45-degree mic, and the respire, because those things I just didn't know what they were by looking at it. So rear mic knob to mix in signal from an additional mic behind the cabinet, click and turn the 45-degree knob mic to mix in signal from an additional mic positioned at a 45-degree angle from a speaker cone. And then respire is from overloud that I guess lets you switch between the real response of the cabinet and a processed version optimized to fit into a mix and avoid frequency overlap. And then the one thing that's funny is that they do have a BP button. And I initially thought that was referring to like band pass because we have a high pass filter and a low pass filter. But no, that will just bypass the cabinet if you have both like the amp and cabinet in and you just want to focus on one or the other. So what we can do here is we can bring this on. And let's just get rid of both of them and then come on here and bring on our amplifier. And let's also just bring on a cabinet. Now, when you're working with the amplifier, it actually does sometimes make sense to also have the cabinet in at the same time. At least that's what I found with working on it. So we'll just go through and do these 4 different sounds and just kind of use different models and different cabinets for them. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I think if you're a guitar player, you'll really appreciate this. If you're not like me, you're not really going to appreciate it a whole lot. I think it's a good effect, but I personally tend to just use my built-in amp effect from Bitwig, or I will use just the free version of Guitar Rig, and that tends to do everything I want it to do. And what I've found tends to work in a lot of situations is to kind of bring this one down, bring this one all the way up. Let's have no filter on. And I'm just curious to know what it will sound like if we go in here and just use the 45-degree mic. And we do have different microphone options we can choose. I'll choose that one and the Austrian one. And we can kind of move them into different places, and sometimes it has more of an obvious sonic effect than others. Like you can hear all the tone shaping as I move away from the speaker cone. But yeah, let's imagine we just did something like this. And then we can bypass everything. And bring it back in. I'm just cranking everything in so we can really hear the effect. And obviously there's going to be cabinets and stuff that are way more aggressive, or I should say amplifiers that are way more aggressive. So let's go over and use something like this because we know how aggressive that's going to be. Kind of like the idea of trying to use this one. Now, I'm not sure in this example, will mic A... Oh, it is making a difference. Oh, okay. So before I was doing this and I had a hard time moving both mics, but in this case, we're good. So let's just use this one microphone and maybe bring in some of the rear. There we go. We're really getting a heavy, heavy bass response. Then got to crank up the presence as high as we can. Not really making much of a difference, but that's okay. So that's pretty cool. Let's go to this one. And I think this one, there's a lot of like background noise in it. So I was having a very hard time getting any of the amps to sound good earlier. Let's Let's go to the orange. Actually, let's use the tweed. Go bright. That's pretty flattering. Maybe this time we'll just use microphone B. This way we can really hear the differences between the microphones. I think this one might actually sound the best. Maybe not. Between these two. You can also flip the phase, but typically with samples, that's not going to sound very good. And then finally, we have this synth bass, which can sometimes be a fun thing to kind of run through this stuff as well. This is a bass super tube, which we could partner again with the bass tube here. Not sure why we're not seeing any signal come out of the up. That probably explains it. That's really aggressive, but we already played with some of these. So I think I'm gonna go to this one, because this one to me sounds very modern. And let's turn off the cabinet for right now. Actually, I take it back. It doesn't sound too modern, does it? It doesn't sound very good at all. But I am, of course, pushing everything in as aggressive as humanly possible. So yeah, let's go back to... Actually, it sounds kind of cool. Let's go back to the bass super tube. And then... That's what I want. Let's find a different cabinet, not just use this bass tube one. Bring in some of mic A. And again for... Oh, we're bypassed. Apologies, I'm over here flipping stuff and it's not making any difference. Sounds pretty cool. Ooh, yeah. Here's where this is making a big difference. And yeah, there you go. That's a look at some of these different models here. Again, I apologize for not going through everything and doing a one-to-one comparison. This is not my area of expertise at all, but hopefully that gives you an idea of the sound and how you can work with it. So just to quickly wrap things up, we covered a lot of different plugins in this video, and there really are some pretty cool things. The problem is they're just too buggy and a little bit too unstable on my machine to where I feel confident enough to actually use them. And luckily nowadays, because computing power is just so strong or whatever, it's not like a situation where I ever need to use them either, because of course these ones in AFX to DAW are offloaded through your interface, similar to the way UAD does it with Apollo. So fingers crossed that the interface works for me. I did have to send it back once and they had to replace the entire motherboard because that was like broken or something. But hopefully after that, this thing is going to be rock solid for me. And it's worth it, you know, even if I never can use any of these effects, just to have an interface that's solid, reliable, does what I want it to do. But hopefully in watching this, you learned something new, got to enjoy seeing some of these emulations, got a little history lesson. And like always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to leave those down below. Hope everyone has a wonderful day. And until next time, take care.